How's it going, everyone? My name is Maximilian, and you're watching episode 24 of Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3, The Online Warrior. What's up, folks? Thank you very much for tuning into another regular episode of Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3 The Online Warrior. And as you're noticing in the title, there's a couple of subjects I'd like to discuss during this episode. One piece of news that has me extremely excited, and another thing that's been going on recently with players that is affecting how the overall game is played and certain character selections. So let's start off with the first one, and it's a subject that I was speaking of a little bit earlier. I think it might have been a few episodes back in the episodes of The Online Warrior, and it was the fact of the oversaturation of Wesker usage. And now we've gotten to the point where we've had a couple of pretty big majors over the past few weeks, notably Final Round and NCR, that have happened, and the usage of Wesker is definitely coming into question. So, as we all know, Wesker on many lists and many folks' considerations is by far the best character in Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3. The reason being, for the folks that might not know, Wesker is a character that has easy combos, good damage output, good mobility, teleport mix-ups, and he has the ability to get damage boosts and speed boosts when his glasses are removed after doing supers. You combine this with levels of X Factor, and you can essentially add one more level of X Factor with this damage and speed percent increase. It's pretty insane, and especially when it comes to a level 3 X Factor Wesker, you can practically consider him the only character in the game with a level 4, and a lot of folks are using right now the, I hear this a lot on commentary streams, the Dark Lord Rises, and they're referring to Wesker level 4 X Factor. It's some scary stuff, and it can be really difficult to block against, and a lot of people are using Wesker no longer on point, and he's specifically used on the back end as a comeback character reserved for level 3 X Factor. So, based off this, there was a lot of Weskers, especially online. Every single team had Wesker, and for the sake of my usage of him, he was a character that I really liked in the original, and I brought him over into this one, and it just turned out that Wesker was a character that ended up being really good. However, my liking around the character was revolved around the fact that he had teleport similar to Strider, but once they added Strider in Ultimate, my infatuation for using Wesker was kind of lessened quite a bit. And this position on the point of my team has kind of been replaced by other characters. However, a lot of people have renounced their position of Wesker on many teams as being the point character, and he's put in the back end as your third backup character. And this is happening a lot, and it happened a lot over the past few months. But notably, what happened at Final Round is we saw the first development of the oversaturation of Wesker, where so many people are using Wesker that we got to the point where we're getting to the point where people know how to fight against him. Even the most basic of players understand what he's doing and what mix-ups he's going for, because in a game like this, unless there's some very hidden technology that you don't see all the time, and someone is developing something that they haven't made internet videos for, that they're trying to keep very secret, when a lot of stuff is exposed with the current level of media and online and, social media, everybody knows everything about these characters a lot of the time, until you get some crazy person that comes up and develops this new technology, which is essentially what happened with Kusoru at the Final Round when he took that whole thing. He's a Japanese player, and I don't think there was much information about the anti-Phoenix technology that got him to where he was at, and the overall solid play using some pretty crazy characters like Rocket Raccoon. He wasn't using Wesker, and a lot of other people at Final Round were not using Wesker. This was kind of a different case of at NorCal Regionals. I think there were quite a few Wesker players, and he was rather prominent once again. But it goes to show that the overusage of a character in a game like this shows the weaknesses of the character especially. Now, I like to compare this to previous fighting games of the past, where you see a couple of specific characters and there's nothing you can do about it. Like, no matter how much technology you grow, those characters are so good that you can't get beyond their offense or their defense. I'm going to use the example of one of my favorite fighting games, Third Strike, and a couple of the best characters in the game were Chun-Li and Yoon. And no matter what you could do, no matter if you knew what those characters could do, and your character's advantages against certain stuff that they could do, there was nothing you could do. Like, they were so good in the hands of players that used them primarily, and the best Chun-Li player in the world versus like the best Necro player in the world, that matchup would be so difficult for the Necro player that even at the maximum potential for each person playing the character, there was nothing they could do. Same thing went for Yoon and how powerful he was, using many of his tactics, his mobility, stuff like that. For you guys that play Third Strike, you know how insane Yoon is and how insane it was that he was also good in Arcade Edition. But nonetheless, this leads me to the fact that Wesker was a character that people did not see a lot of exploited weaknesses to until people used him way too much. And constantly you see him on the back end of teams, so you tag him in, you know, to get rid of his X-Factor ability. You see that fact that he has most of his mix-ups revolve around teleports and stuff like that, and that can be pretty predictable because his teleports are assigned to certain areas on the screen and they're not character locking. So there's a lot of stuff to Wesker that makes him extremely good, very easy to use, a damn effective character, one of the best in the game. But now we've gotten to the point that he's so overused that he might not actually be that. I think he's still considered at least top 5, but he might not be the best character in the game because he doesn't have those glaring weaknesses. If we're talking about a character that is not as much oversaturated right now, that is still heavily used, almost similar to the point of which Phoenix was used in the original Marvel. Like, granted, I think you guys will agree with me, Phoenix was a character that was ridiculous in the original Marvel vs. Capcom 3. However, not everybody was a Phoenix player. And even in the top 8s at EVO and a lot of majors, not everybody was using Phoenix. Everyone had their own crazy tactics revolving around things like the DHC glitch and stuff like that. So, but Phoenix players that were really good with Phoenix, guys like Clockwork and many others, Viscant of course, they were really good, and it was really profound when they went to a tournament and they kind of like took everything because they spent the time with Phoenix. Guys like Filipino Champ as well. And even recently, Filipino Champ won NCR using Phoenix, so it's just to show that character is not dead just yet. But what I'm comparing this to is the usage of another character in Ultimate right now that is kind of similar on like the usability in tournaments, and it's Zero. So Zero has kind of a higher accessibility than most characters. The extended combos he has, like his Touch of Death stuff, can be pretty difficult to do, and a lot of his combos aren't the easiest to perform compared to some other characters like Spencer and Wesker and guys like that. However, Zero, when it comes to how crazy good a character is, I would honestly compare Zero to the Chun-Li's and the Yoons of Third Strike, because I see new Zero tech almost every time I see the character used in tournaments. And when Zero is used at maximum potential, the guy can be nearly untouchable. The character is ridiculously powerful. He has good damage output in the hands of a skilled player, not as so much in the hands of somebody who doesn't really know and have the expertise and time with Zero. But when you see stuff that like a combo just goes on forever and ever and ever, it's really hard to believe, especially when he gets into his lightning loops and stuff like that. It'll blow your mind how much damage that stuff does when you see how little damage his initial combo does. And then he has like the Mega Buster from all distance. He has the ability to cancel like from his specials in the air now. It's insane that they gave Zero more buffs in this one. And we don't see a lot of the really impressive Zero play until we see some really crazy players that show up out of nowhere, and you're blown away by what Zero can do. So I'm actually going to give the current top tier character that I personally think is Zero, and the oversaturation of Wesker has definitely hurt Wesker in the overall rankings as far as him being an overused character and a character that belongs on the essentially the oversaturation list. So, interesting developments when it comes to character usage in Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3. And I'm really excited to see people bringing out newer characters. Kusoru is a guy that was a perfect example of showing new tech with characters, and when you have stuff that you're not exposed to all the time, it can be really hard to defend it against a guy who's extremely good with it. So, stuff like Hagar on point, you know, Chris on point, things like that. So that leads me into my next topic of conversation, is going to be the exposure of people using these teams that are having this crazy ability to use these characters we don't see. And it's the recent announcement that's happened. And if you guys don't know, Super Battle Opera is this gigantic big tournament in Japan. It's essentially from like my perspective the EVO of Japanese like arcade games, but they're kind of moving out of like arcade games now, and they have a lot of console games as of late. I personally haven't followed SBO for a very long time. Back in my Third Strike and CVS2 days, I religiously followed it. So this was like the mid 2000s, like 2004, 2005, 2003. And it was to the point where I was following the players that were going to SBO. There was a lot of drama. It was Americans traveling overseas to Japan to face off against the Japanese, but it was really notorious that when American players went over to SBO, it's a very difficult tournament. I think it's like one round. It's like one game. It's not even like a best of two. So it's or a best of three. It's pretty crazy on the overall difficulty rank of a tournament. And at the same time, it makes it really enjoyable to watch. Unfortunately, I don't know if there's going to be much viewership for SBO because I'm not too sure if it's streamed or it might be a pay-per-view stream. But the reason I'm excited about it, and I'm extremely jazzed about SBO this year coming up in September, is that they're expanding their games list. A lot beyond what they would usually do for the arcade games of the past and newer arcade games. They're expanding it to, believe it or not, games like Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3 and games like Soul Calibur 5. So this is going to be awesome. We're going to have players coming from the US and other states and other countries around that represent games that the US is notorious for being good at. For example, the US is kind of like the destination for Marvel players, for the most prolific and best executing Marvel players in the world come out of the States a lot of the time. And it's kind of been known as like our game. I think Marvel vs. Capcom 2 was at SBO for maybe like a couple of years, like back in the day. And I remember watching and following up with this on like DVDs that were released from SBO. That we took games like Marvel 2 pretty frequently when they were at SBO until it was gone, I think. I'm not the best at history of SBO because I briefly followed it back in the day. But I'm really excited because we've seen a lot of these recent Japanese Marvel players coming out of the woodwork and seeing some really impressive and crazy stuff from these players. Stuff that's really beyond the norm and beyond the usability of the characters we've normally seen. So this is pretty exciting. When it comes to like the East versus the West, it's always been the West dominating Marvel, and now we have a chance where we have these Japanese players every once in a while coming over to American soil and taking games from us from a game that we're notoriously the best at. So this is pretty freaking cool. I like seeing this rivalry come up once again. Because we don't get that many Japanese players coming over to the US to represent Marvel too often that show up in like top 8. Kusoru is one of the best examples of what happened at Final Round, and it was crazy. It was one of the most hyped things ever, and once again, Final Round offers one of the most hyped moments ever at tournaments. So shoutouts to an awesome tournament with Final Round, and I'm hoping that we can see more stuff like this at SBO this year. I can't even imagine. I wonder what's going to happen with the qualifiers over here in the US, the SBO qualifiers for Marvel vs. Capcom 3, and see who goes over to Japan to represent the US for the game. And I'm also even more excited to see who's going to be representing Japan in the game if Kusoru makes another appearance at SBO. So, as you guys can tell, like with my channel and the videos I do, I don't really follow like the individual players a lot. I add perspective and I add reference to them because they're the guys that bring the hype for these games. They're the ones that offer the following, the viewership, and they offer the ability to become better because you have the perspective of amazing players. Because a lot of the time, I focus on the games themselves. Like, I kind of take what happens around the community into perspective, but I really focus on the games, and I enjoy the games to no end because there's a lot of other places that provide really good information, insights, videos, history around the players of these games. And guys like Cross Counter, iPlayWinner, Shoryuken.com, they're dedicated to the players. And what I do with my channel and my videos, I kind of dedicate it to the games themselves, and I take the players into consideration because, like I said, they bring the hype and they bring the overall experience to the new learning level. So, but with this situation, like, I'm all about the players right now because I'm really anxious to see who's going to represent USA and who's going to represent Japan and what's going to happen at SBO. And I would not be surprised. I'm probably going to go to whatever lengths I can to purchase the stream if it's like a pay-per-view type of stream situation. I want to see that stuff happen live And hopefully a few of you guys will join me when it actually happens later in September, or maybe they'll release a DVD off of it. I don't know, but it's just to let you guys know what's happening with the overall world tournament scene of Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3, how things are changing now, and once again we're going to have a perspective of not just big US tournaments, we're going to have a very big one happening in Japan. So I hope you guys enjoyed this update for the latest happenings of Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3. Some pretty interesting stuff, especially for a game that's been out for just about 6 months now, and it's still growing, still evolving, and it's still fun, and I think that's one of the most important parts. Be sure to subscribe and stick around, as this week I'm going to be double dipping on Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3 The Online Warrior, and kind of going back to the old fashion of providing some online ranked games and giving you guys live insight, and we're going to take a look at the post-match analysis of each game and find out what was the deciding factor, I believe, during each one of these games. I'm also highlighting Street Fighter Cross Tekken this week with 5 straight days of ranked games provided with live commentary for you guys to enjoy outside of the regular Online Warrior shenanigans, so stay tuned for that. As always, thank you all very much for watching the video. This has been Maximilian, and I'll see you next time.